everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is MTG Ghouldude, and today I have something special for y'all. I've been I've been thinking about doing more tribes, trying to show y'all the ins and outs and who's and what's of other tribes, big and small. So this is the first venture outside of our beloved tribe, zombies. So, if you read the thumbnail, you know what's coming. Shades. Shades and all. Oh my god, I was about to say shades again. Oh. But, we're going to get into some shades. This is in no particular order. These are mana cost. These are name in order that way. So, let's get into it. I don't have a lot of information. All I know is for a fact that whenever I was a young blossoming commander player, I built Isshin Shades. So I do have a little bit of knowledge on this subject. And they're not the greatest, but they are pretty fun. So let's go on ahead and get into it. Starting off with Thirsting Shade. For a single black, it's a 1/1 with the lifelink. For 2 and a black, it gets +1/+1 to end of turn. Not bad. For a 1-drop, it's a 1/1 with lifelink. And you can pump it. And you'll notice that this is a recurring theme with Shades. They have a pump ability. One way or another. One mana amount or another. On to our next. Mire Shade from Odyssey, I want to say. It's palm trees. Mirage. I'm learning. Making sure I remember. For 1 and a black, you get a 1/1 Shade. It has, for a black, you can sacrifice Swamp, put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can only do this as a sorcery. Chilling Shade for 2 and a black, it's a 1/1. Snow Creature Shade. It has flying and it gets +1/+1 for each snow mana put into it until it's a turn. Frozen Shade for 2 and a black. A lot of these are 3 mana too. It's a 0/1 Shade, and it gave, for a black, you can give it +1/+1 until on the turn. Ichor Shade. This one is out of our new March of the Machine set. So for 2 and a black, it's a 2/3, breaking away from the 1/1 that we all know and love. It's a Phyrexian Shade, and I'm sorry, but I love this art. I don't like Phyrexians a lot, but I love this art, for real. At the beginning of your end step, if an artifact or creature was put into a graveyard from the battlefield this turn, put a counter on it. This breaks the mold that we know of Shades that we'll see later on, where you just pump it yourself. This one just gains the ability to, just has the inert ability to pump itself for aristocrat type strategies. Looming Shade for 2 and a black, it gets +1/+1 for every black put into it. Veiled Shade for 2 and a black, it's a 2/2, and for 1 and a black, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, because apparently that 1 black was a little bit too powerful. Crypt Ripper for 2 and 2 black, it's a 2/2 with haste. For a black, it gets +1/+1. Darkling Stalker. This was errata to be a shade, because I guess because of the art, it makes a little bit more sense. For 3 and a black, it's a 1/1. It has Regenerate for a black. Then it has the Shade ability. I'm going to just call it the Shade ability. Drifting Shade for 3 and a black, it's a 1/1. It has flying and the Shade ability. Dungeon Shade for 3 and a black, it's a 1/1. It has flying and it also has the Shade ability. Fetid Horror. This looks more like a zombie. I'm sorry, this is a zombie art if I've ever seen one. But it's a Shade. And it's a 1/2 for 4. From Mirage. I'm not going to say that out loud because I think I would butcher it horribly. And it's a Shade. It's a Snow Shade. From Ice Age. That's from the Ice Age. 3 and a black, it's a 1/2. Liliana Shade for 2 black. It's a 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a swamp card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. This one is actually pretty good if you have effects that allow you to bring them back multiple times in a game. You can just like, alright, it died, I'm gonna just get it back and get another swamp. and pump up my other shades. Perilous Shadow. For 2 and a black, it's an insect shade. It's a 0/4. And for 1 and a black, you get to pump it for 2/2 until end of turn. So, a lot of these shades have, and that's Return to Ravnica? I think so. A lot of these shades have the inert ability to use any amount of infinite mana you have. As long as you have the black to pay for it. Because most of the time, infinite mana combos are either a singular color or multiple colors or colorless. This is where it breaks the mold period, because this is a white shade. This is the only white shade I've seen and Magic has ever produced. Shade of Trocare for 3 and a white. It doesn't even seem right to say white. For 3 and a white, it's a 1/2 shade, and for a white, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and it also has Suspend 3 for a white. This one is not that bad. If it had like Shade Soldier, I think it'd probably see more play, because that white ability is pretty good. Tattered Apparition for 3 and a black. It's a 2/2 with flying, and for 1 and a black, it gets +1/+1 to end of turn. This one looks like more of a horror to me. I don't know. It's just the way it's shaped, the way it's floating. Whispering Shade for 3 and a black. It has Swamp Walk. Oh, excuse me. And it's a 1/1. The Swamp Walk for shades is extremely important. Like, if there was a way to give all your shades Swamp Walk and you had an Urborg, then you just got free reign to hit your opponent until you're tired of them. Zoth Shade, 3 and a black, 2/2. And this one has a 2 and a black to give it +2/+2 until end of turn, where recently we've only seen the 1 and a black. So apparently at one point in time they thought shades were too powerful. Nightwing Shade for 4 and a black. This is where this one gets really expensive. But, I mean, you gotta pay for what you're getting, and even though sometimes they think we're getting a lot, it's not a lot for a 2/2 for 5. But it does have flying, and it does get +1/+1 for the 2 mana, which would be a better rate if it got +2/+2. Slithering Shade for a single black. It has Defender, and it gets +1/+1 to turn for a black. If you're Hellbent, it can attack as though it didn't have Defender, which Hellbent is if you don't have any cards in your hand. But it starts out as a 0/1, which is really strange. Nakia Shade, which looks more like a golem in this art. But for 1 and a black, it's a 1/1 shade and gets +1/+1 until end of turn, unless any player pays 2. So like, oh, I just realized if you put Infect on a shade, oh look, you died. Why? I pump it up to 10. That's not a bad strategy if I think about it now. Oh, a multicolor shade. This is a first. Cinder Shade for 1 a black and a red. It's a 1/1, and it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for a black. Or you can pay a red, sacrifice it. It deals damage equal to its power. This is another one of the, but it's only to target creature. This is another one of those infinite loops you can do if you can give it infinite power, then sack to kill whatever you want. If there was a way to like do weird stuff with this, I could think of it off the top of my head. But I also love the art. That's a pretty cool art, made by Nelson DeCastro, however you want to say it. I do apologize to the artist if I'm butchering your name. Gateway Shade. Now this is beautiful art. This is like Gates to the Underworld type stuff right here. So for 2 and a black, it's a shade, it's a 1/1, and it has a shade ability, and you can tap it, untap gate you control, and it gets +2/+2 until the turn, where the 1/1 is, you gotta pay for it. which in a way you're still paying for it. If you tap a gate and still calling out tap on mana, it's okay. Deepwood Legate. This, in my opinion, is probably the strongest shade we have if green is on the table. If a forest is on the table and you have a swamp, you can play it without paying its mana cost. That is a free 1/1 that you can pump up and possibly kill somebody with. Doesn't get any better than that. Evernight Shade for 3 and a black. It has the shade ability and it has Undying, which, in my opinion, a shade should only be able to like take damage. It shouldn't be able to take damage. It should be able to like deal damage, but that's it. But it is a 1/1 from Commander 14. Undercity Shade. Ooh. For 4 and a black, it's a 1/1. It has Fear and a shade ability. And here's the big boy. Here's my boy right here, Isshin Shade. For 3 and 3 black. Oh, that's a heavy mana cost. And what do you get? A legendary Shade Knight. That's a 5/5 with protection from white. Yeah, because you're really hurting those folks that are those white human decks. Yep, this was the commander I chose for my shade deck. I probably could have did a whole lot better, but I wanted to be thematic. I wanted to be on theme. I was going to be on point. Shade, shade, shade. And all I felt was shame, shame, shame. Anyways. But yeah, I like it. The older art is still beautiful. I don't knock it. I like the new art too. It's just shades hold a special place in my heart. Misery Shadow. We're getting into our rares now. For 1 and a black, it's a 2/2. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. And here's where we return to the 1 mana cost pump ability. And it's just a generic. You could pay anything. You could be colorless. And that would be awesome. That's awesome. That's like, the mana dork heaven. Outlet heaven. If you're wanting to be so efficient with your mana use, there you go. Pump it all into Misery Shade. Actually, I feel like I might want to build shades again with that. Might even do a deck tech on it. Let me know if you would see that. Watch that deck tech. Then Tuco Shade for 2 black. It's a 2/1, breaking away from the evenness. Besides, of all the other weird ones we've had. It has the shade ability. In life, the Nintuku study nature by revering it. In death, they study nature by disembowing it. That's pretty cool. Skyclave Shade. This came in the new Capano Commander decks. Yeah. This is a really weird one because it looks like it was... Looks like it's still on Zendikar though, if you ask me. But for 1 and a black, you get a 3/1. It has kicker for 2 and a black, and it can't block. And if it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And landfall, if it enters the battle, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you have Skyclave Shade in your graveyard, and it's your turn, you may cast it from your graveyard this turn. Which a recurable threat is not a bad thing. I actually kind of like this. This is actually pretty cool. Dreadshade from Dominaria. Just Dominaria. For 3 black, it's a 3/3, and it has a shade ability. So this one is actually pretty gruesome looking. I actually like the art on this one. Kudu. Yep. Arthur of Shadows. This is where we see shades. This is another instance of where we see shades mixing with other things. So for 4 and a black, it's a 3/3. Shade Warlock. And when Arthur of Shadows enters the battlefield, exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. Choose a non-land card exiled this way. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. It's actually kind of like a reverse Predator's Grasp, where you want to take the best thing in the graveyard and cast it. I feel like I could really use this in a shade deck. That would be pretty cool. Nirkana Revenant, the best shade of all shades. This is probably the MVP of any shade deck. I mean, besides, the lands. So for 4 and 2 black, it's a 4/4 Vampire Shade. Whenever you tap a swamp for mana, specifically a swamp, add an additional black. That's pretty good whenever you have a very mana hungry creature base. And it has its own shade ability. And then we have an affiliate card, Shade's Breath. So for 1 and a black, it's an instant speed spell. To end a turn, each creature you control becomes black and its creature type becomes Shade. We are turning everything into shades, which is pretty dang cool. And it gains black. This creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It gets us the Shade ability. So would we call that Shade's Breath? Should we just call that canon now? Every time it says mana cost +1 plus something, it's Shade's Breath. I think we should. I think we should get that going. But I mean, this is not something you would use in your shade deck, but this would be something you used, for the fun of it. Like, say, I need to see the wording for Shade's Breath. I need to see does it say additional? 1 second. Shade's Breath. Each creature you control becomes a shade and gains that ability. That is, I need to see rulings. No ruling, so they just become those creatures. They become nothing else. So if you are in a tribal deck and you just want to push through a little bit more damage, but the tribal at that point does not matter, this could be the card for you, especially if you can get infinite mana. You just make them all huge. But that's going to be it for today, guys. I really appreciate everybody that watches, likes, comments, and all my subscribers. And if you like this kind of content and you want to see more, let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what tribe, or even an unknown tribe, I should go to next. I already have one in the pipe working on right now that I kind of just like because of certain things. There's a person in my life that has sang this TikTok song for a very long time, and not until recently he stopped singing it. But that's coming. But if there's one you want me to do, let me know down in the comments below. But for right now, that's going to be it, and I will see you guys next time in the graveyard.